The IEC revealed that around 9 million voters aren't registered. The majority of those are young people, and now a citizen survey shows that about 4.5 million South African youngsters have no plans to vote. So to find out why exactly, we cross to our Cape Town studios where we're joined by Reza Omar from Citizen Survey. Reza, thanks a lot for joining us this evening on Newsnight. Some of those reasons tabled by young people, 4.5 million of them saying that they are eligible to vote, but they're simply not interested in voting. Why is that?
That is correct. We went to investigate why these youngsters didn't want to vote. And when we analyzed the data, what we found is they were facing what we call political alienation. In the general population, about half of South Africans feel close to a political party. However, amongst the youth, 80% did not feel close to any political party. So they are starting to feel politically alienated.
So with that political alienation, I mean, we've seen the EFF articulate its manifesto this afternoon. We had the African National Congress that gave their manifesto as well. And it appears as though the big rhetoric was around creating employment opportunities, especially when it comes to young people. So what you're saying, and by obviously the stats from this survey, it would appear as though young people are listening to these rhetorics, but they're simply not buying it, really.
Well, if you consider the 18 to 24-year-olds, they were born after the end of apartheid. The 25 to 34-year-olds, they spent their formative period in the new democracy. And the democracy is 25 years old. People have been promised jobs for a very long time. And when we examine the youth, especially at this particular point in time, youth unemployment is extraordinarily high. So these youth are asking, what is this democracy all about? And
then we looked at the fact that in 2018, for example, South Africa is going into an economic recession, 2018 rather, South Africa going into an economic recession was one of the pivotal moments actually for young people, because the ones that were affected were those young people that were looking for jobs, that were actively in the marketplace trying to find employment and not getting the right employment opportunities, fueled obviously by this feeling of marginalization. One would say that young people not voting is actually a win for whichever majority party there is.
Well, we modeled how the young who aren't going to register to vote were likely to vote. And their votes would have been quite different were they to cast them. However, young people these days have a different way of participating in the political process. When we look at other movements, such as hashtag data must fall, hashtag fees must fall, young people, while not necessarily taking to the ballot, are finding ways of having their voices heard.
Would you then say that young people are finding political parties almost redundant? I mean, you're speaking about how young people are able to champion causes via, I mean, for example, the fees must fall. They were able to coerce government into, making sure that fees fall. So then that brings into question the relevance of political parties from a youth perspective, if they're able to champion their own causes, whether through social media or on the ground activities, and actually see tangible results. That's the thing. They champion these causes and something happens.
Well, this is what has been happening with a fair amount of youth that feel politically alienated. However, democracy does require voting. It requires free and fair elections, inclusive and credible elections. So one of the great challenges facing the political parties and the democracy as a whole is how do we bring them back into the fold so that they can also cast their ballot and partake in the democratic process.
Well, how do we bring them back into the fold? I mean, we speak about how young people are feeling as though, number one, they're marginalized. Number two, they just, they're not being heard by political parties. Number three, they can champion their own causes and win. Then how do you bring them into this democratic system that we've created?
Well, one of the things we ask people in the South African Citizen Survey are, what are the most important problems facing South Africa? And the first most important problem is unemployment. 27 million, nearly, believe that unemployment is the most important problem, followed by crime and corruption and poverty and destitution. Now, these are the questions of the day. the most important pressing questions facing South Africans that have to be addressed if we stand any chance of bringing the youth back into the fold.
And then now obviously these are, statistics, and this is information that is freely available for public consumption. When you release statistics such as this, and when you release surveys of this nature, do political parties wake up and pay attention to what is being said? So clearly, number one priority here is creating opportunities of employment and employment opportunities so that young people can feel as though they're participating in the economy. But if this is not filtering down to political parties, it does not matter how much they promise, people are not going to feel as though they're being taken seriously.
Yes. Well, throughout our democratic period over the last 10 years, youth have been promised jobs regularly. However, times are changing. And at this particular junction in our democracy, more than promises are needed in order to persuade them that things are actually going to be going forward. And that's what everybody really wants. Unemployment, crime, corruption has to be addressed.
Now, with regards to that then, and I remember once such a pertinent time in history, the Arab Spring, for example, was brought about and championed by young people, significantly using social media to mobilize community members and on the base. So that says something about the power of social media and the energy that young people put into practice to champion a specific cause. Looking at this survey, looking at 4.5 million of these young people who feel as though they're being marginalized, could South Africa potentially find itself where young people are actually revolting against the system and saying, you guys have not been working for us for the past 25 years of this democracy, and we do not find you relevant, therefore we're going to turn things around and have something similar?
There's always going to be a portion of the population that do not participate in elections. However, what we're observing is the political process, the democracy, was hard fought and hard won. And there is a role for partaking in the democracy that is necessary for the longevity of our country and taking it forward. So portions of when the IEC had their last voter registration weekend, 750,000 people came to register, and the majority of them were young. So it's the message and the importance of persuading young people, come, register, make sure your voice is heard, because whether or not you vote or not, political parties will be coming into power. And this way, at least you have the opportunity to influence its direction.
Well, from your mouth to the young person's ears. Reza, thanks a lot for joining us this evening on Newsnight, just shedding some light in terms of exactly what is in the mindset of young people regarding voting. We've got 4.5 million of them that really are saying they're not interested in voting. Reza Omar from Citizen Survey giving us the latest regarding that.